Commission at 7 p.m. on Wednesday, July 15th. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Bartlett,
Here.
Commissioner Cohn,
Here.
Commissioner Heald,
Here.
Commissioner Kentner,
Here.
Commissioner Miller,
Here.
Commissioner Peters,
Here.
Commissioner Stone.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Very good, thank you. First order of business tonight is to inform our public with regard to the public comment process. Due to issues with the platform that we're using, all public comment tonight will be submitted via Lakewood Speaks, and that platform is open now and will be open until 8 p.m. tonight to receive additional comments from the public. So please go to lakewoodspeaks.org and click on Union Vision, and then click on the the information there to submit a comment. And throughout the course of this meeting, the comments will be coming into our Lakewood Speaks accounts. The commissioners are all logged on, and we will take the time to read through all of these comments during the course of the evening. Do please be aware that the comment window will close at 8 p.m. Is there anything else to add, Mr. Parker?
No, not at all. Thank you.
Okay, very good. So with that, would the clerk please read item 3 on the agenda?
Case PL 19-001, Union Neighborhood Vision Plan.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Since public comment is ongoing at this point in time through the Lakewood Speaks, I believe now we'll move next to the staff presentation.
Great. Thank you, Chair. I'm Roger Waddell, a comprehensive planning and research manager with the city. And we're going through a presentation that many of you have seen already. However, there are many people that have not seen it. So we're going to go through presentation again. And then we'll go through some of the responses to Planning Commissioner comments at the at the study session of June 3rd. I'll be making part of the presentation. Christy Ivanoff, planner with the city, will also be presenting, as well as Cheney Bostic, urban design consultant. I also wanted to note that Mike Whitaker, Lakewood Transportation Engineering, is in the meeting and is available to answer any transportation questions should they come up later in the meeting, as well as Ann Hine, Lakewood City Engineer, who's available to discuss any drainage issues or other engineering issues that may come up. So with that, I will start the presentation. And again, this is the presentation for the public hearing on July 15th, 2020 for the Union Neighborhood Vision Plan. This is the 5th meeting with the Planning Commission about the Union Neighborhood Vision Plan. And during this public hearing, Planning Commission will be considering adopting the plan as a guiding document to address land use, building, and site design concerns. No changes to regulations are part of this plan. Those would occur as a next step. The agenda for tonight will include the background and context for the plan. How this plan ties into previous planning efforts within Union and within the recent development dialogue process. And then the details of the Union Vision Plan will be discussed, including outreach, community meetings and surveys, and what was heard from the surveys, and a summary of ways to achieve the vision. Okay, next slide. Here's a timeline showing the previous plans for Union, and each plan has a specific focus. And again, the vision plan focuses on land use and building and site design. The need for the vision plan for the Union area came from the development dialogue process, which was and continues to be a community conversation. It started in 2017 about topics related to sustainability, design, parking, and how the design of new buildings could better serve our community's vision for the future. As a result of the development dialogue process, City Council adopted several citywide zoning changes to address community concerns about development, which are outlined in the development dialogue page on Lakewood Together. But some land use and design concerns are area specific and are best addressed through area plans. And the first planned area is the Union area, and there may be others in the future. And it's important to note that the Union area is first because of recent changes in the neighborhood have prompted concerns about how this area develops in the future. Also, properties in the Union area are predominantly privately owned and can be developed or redeveloped based on property rights. If no action is taken on this plan or implementation, the Union area could continue to develop in ways the community is concerned about, and the type and quality of development will be primarily driven by property owners and market conditions. And if this process continues through, we can help shape the type and quality of development so it's more aligned with what the community wants, and the vision plan is the beginning of such a process. So to understand this land use and design concerns for Union, these concerns, the process is 3 elements: the vision plan itself, a zoning overlay, and design guidelines. Now, the vision plan, which is the focus of this meeting, is the first step in the process. The plan documents the initial community input addressing vision, land use, and design. Recommendations presented in the plan would be discussed in more detail and refined with the community in the next steps should the Planning Commission adopt the vision plan. Now, the zoning overlay and design guidelines are the next steps in the process. Those are the implementation tools that will help communicate with developers and property owners the type and quality of development that the community wants to see within this area. The zoning overlay can address concerns about building height, building setback from the street, open space, land use specific to Union, and this would potentially be a new article in the zoning ordinance. The design guidelines would address design and aesthetic concerns such as building materials, form, colors, site layout, etc. And this would be a separate document from the zoning ordinance and would include illustrations, diagrams, and examples. And during these steps, should the vision plan be adopted by Planning Commission, there would be more community meetings to expand on everything that was recommended and designed and discussed in the vision plan. The next slide will focus on the vision plan and briefly summarize the process and recommendations. And here's a map showing the boundaries of the planning area, and the boundary is consistent with previous planning efforts for the area. And I'll turn it over to Christy now to talk about the outreach process and community meetings.
Hello. So to gather input from the community, 5 meetings were held in 2019 at the Hampton Inn near Union Boulevard. During each meeting, we asked attendees to participate in a survey to provide their input on specific topics. The first 2 meetings focused on vision and function. The third meeting focused on site and building design. And during the last 2 meetings, we presented recommendations and asked for participants' feedback. And the same survey questions and resources were also available online at lakewood.org/unionvision. The following slides include a series of maps that show how the community was notified about the community meetings during the vision plan public process in 2019. In 2019, 2 postcards were mailed to more than 2,000 residents and businesses within the planning area boundary with details about the community meetings. The same 2 postcards were mailed to the contact person for the HOA and neighborhood organizations within or adjacent to the planning area boundary. 8 posts on Nextdoor were made to 20 neighborhoods announcing upcoming meetings. The post reached approximately 6,500 individuals. And Lakewood staff regularly attended the Union Corridor Professionals Group and announced upcoming meeting dates for this project during that meeting. The Union Corridor Professionals Group also included the Union Vision meeting information in its e-newsletter. This slide shows the resulting outreach map. Should the Planning Commission adopt the vision plan, there will be more opportunities for community members to share their input during the next phases of this process. This slide shows the 2 postcards that were mailed and the poster that was shared in 2019 with businesses and organizations to post in common areas. And here are a few images from the community meetings last year. Roger will now discuss the survey responses and the recommendations.
Okay, the first meeting focused on vision and land use, and the survey asked participants to complete the sentence. In 20 years, the Union neighborhood should be a place that. Now, this slide lists a few of the responses received. The complete survey results are available at lakewood.org/unionvision. Okay, next slide. There are many phrases that people use to describe the vision over the next 20 years, including vibrant, safe, sustainable, walkable, unique restaurants, employment opportunities. These are just to name a few. And the survey helped create the vision statement. And I'll quickly read through it as it shows up on the slide. And it's, in 20 years, the Union neighborhood is envisioned to be a diverse, thriving community that is walkable and safe. A variety of restaurants and retail make it a destination for residents and visitors alike. Thriving employment and services support those who live and work here. The area is easy to navigate and travel through. The natural beauty of ample landscaping and open space offers tranquility in this vibrant corridor. So that is the overall long-term vision statement. Land use characteristics and site design and building design and mobility and access are planning tools that can help achieve the vision. The vision plan is organized into these 3 recommendation categories. Land use and characteristics will be discussed first. The project is large, but 3 smaller sub-areas emerged based on their key characteristics and the existing land uses, as shown on the left side. The zoning ordinance identifies the allowed uses and zone district, and there are 8 different zone districts within the entire planning area. And this slide on the right shows the 8 zone districts for the Union area and how they are in the area. During the first 2 meetings, participants were asked to describe their vision and desired land use for the 3 sub areas. And here are some of the responses heard for each of the sub area. Just leave that up for a second. Okay, next slide. Based on these responses, recommendations were drafted to either remove or add specific land uses for each sub area. Now, if you look on the green plus indicates added land use, and the red X means to remove, but recommends to remove land use. And again, these are recommendations. Should the plan be adopted, that would be a next step. And you can please refer to the vision plan for the full list of zoning and land use recommendations. It's important to keep in mind all of the land uses that are existing and allowed for each zone district. The recommendations are only to remove a few land uses based on the feedback that was heard, and it would only apply to the Union area for future development. This slide is one example of the MCT district in the planning area, and you can see all the permitted uses are shown in the white text, and the limited land uses on the lower right-hand corner are indicated in the red text. The second tool to achieve the vision is through site and building design. During the 3rd meeting, participants were asked their preference for building styles, development, building design, streetscape design, and public plaza elements. I'll now turn it over to Cheney Bostic to talk about the survey responses and some of the recommendations for site and building design. Cheney.
Thank you, Roger, commissioners, and everyone viewing online. So as part of the vision plan process, in terms of design, we conducted a visioning process with the community. You can see some pictures from that in-person event with the posters. This is also online. And the purpose of this is really to ask, what should the future of Union Boulevard corridor look and feel like? There's been a lot of debate about design of new development on the corridor, and this plan recommends a design review process to ensure that we raise the bar for design in new development and address the concerns raised. This process included an online survey and in-person survey using what we call a visual preferencing process, where people vote and answer questions via images and sort of like a gut reaction to the question. So we tried to show a wide range of possibilities and give people lots of options. We asked which building types were preferred, offering retail and entertainment variations and residential and employment variations to choose from based on the previous process going through questions about land use. We asked what priorities for new development was, with answers ranging from more open space to affordable housing, sustainable design features. And finally, we asked about specific design features, getting into the design of buildings with options for building massing, roof forms and building heights, facade articulation and transparency, ground floor treatments, and materials and color. And so I'll go through some of the highlights next. Next slide, please. So the following is a synthesis of the findings from that exercise. The majority of respondents preferred facades that are layered and proportional, buildings that include a mix of solid and glass, but not overwhelmed by one or the other, buildings that are varied in mass and step down in scale to the streets and nearby residential. Next slide. Respondents prefer to see a mix of building heights. Everything shouldn't be the same, in other words, and a general preference for lower heights than what current zoning allows was prominent. Ground floor buildings should be landscaped and contain interesting architectural features to activate the ground floor. Colors primarily comprised of earth tones were preferred. Next slide. They thought buildings should use, keep it simple and not overwhelmed with lots of materials, but keep it rather to like 2 or 3 materials, and masonry was a preferred primary material. We also asked about streets and connectivity for new development, and many were passionate about adding street trees and water quality. I just drove down Union last night after the rainstorm, and I think we all know that this area can flood fast. So looking to solutions to mitigate the abundant runoff and flooding will be key in new development. And finally, shared use paths where people can walk and bike alongside one another was a popular choice for Union Boulevard. Walking paths were a popular choice. So with all the employment in the area and this new world we live in, providing walking paths for people to get fresh air, safely distance, and seating areas for people to relax. Public art and sculptures were also desired. So what does this all mean? At the vision plan level, what we want to do is boil this down to some high-level design principles, and then through the next processes, including design guidelines, really dive into the details for those. So each of these are expanded in the plan, but they include contextual, expressive, lively, and sustainable as the key principles for Union Boulevard in new development. These are, as I said, meant to provide the basis for next steps. So those would include writing design guidelines that would actually influence new development through design standards and guidelines. And I believe I'll hand it back to Roger.
Okay. And again, just kind of summarize, the vision plan outlines recommendation for mobility and accessibility, which reinforced recommendations in the 2018 transportation plan. And again, it's important to note with the next slide that the vision plan is a high level look at the concepts related to these land use and design in the area. And these concepts would be implemented in subsequent actions by Planning Commission and City Council. And then just to summarize totally, this concludes the presentation for the Union Neighborhood Vision Plan for the Planning Commission public hearing on July 15th, 2020. Staff recommends that Planning Commission adopt the Union Neighborhood Vision Plan. And again, with the Planning Commission Chair's permission, I could go through some of the comments from Planning Commission at the June 3rd study session and how they were addressed by staff.
Yes, Mr. Waddell, I think that would be a good idea to go through those comments.
Okay, thank you. Again, there were a number of comments at the study session, and I'm going to be reading a little bit here, so I'll go through my notes. And they were really organized into three categories: public outreach, comments and responses, plan documents, comments and responses, and that's where the red line version of the document would reflect those changes. And then there's some general comments and responses. So I'll go through each one. Starting out with the public outreach. First comment was the Planning Commission requested direct mailing notification for public hearing to a larger area to include residents to the south of the project area, south of Alameda. And staff sent postcards to approximately 21,000 addresses in the area that is shown in map 1 that Planning Commission has in front of them. They were sent on July 2nd and delivered in a few days. Postcards were sent to the contact person for registered homeowners associations, neighborhood organizations, and business associations that are on map 2 in front of Planning Commission. And they were also sent on July 2nd. The second public outreach comment was the Commission requested notification on nextdoor.com for the public hearing in order to reach a larger audience within Green Mountain, Solterra, and the Commission requested meeting information posted on Denver Post Your Hub and send a reminder email to the counselors on Ward 1 and 4. The notification was posted to a larger area on Nextdoor, shown on map 3, posted on Denver Post Your Hub, and notification emails were sent to counselors in wards 1 and 4. And third comment was Planning Commission requested staff to contact representatives of St. Anthony Hospital to get their inputs. Representatives were contacted, and I spoke to or traded messages with Nicole Milo, their senior advisor for government and community affairs. And she stated that St. Anthony's did not have any specific comments on the plan at this point, but they indicated they're interested in participating in the process for in future phases. And she also indicated their new CEO, Kevin Jenkins, has only been in the position for 2 months to this point, and they're reviewing their future plans. So they don't have anything to share currently, but we also mentioned that we would inform and involve St. Anthony's representatives as this process moves forward. So that was the third comment. Those were the outreach comments and responses. The plan document comments and responses. One comment was proposed, Commission requested a red line document, which was supplied to the Commission. Comment number 5, recommendation for design guidelines. Commission requested the following principle: to strengthen the recommendation C3 to state that the intent is to increase required building setbacks from the street on Union Boulevard. And that was added to the text in recommendation C3, principle 1 on page 31. If you'd like me to read them, I won't read them verbatim unless you'd like me to. And then include language on recommendation C4 that the zoning overlay process should include reducing building heights in certain zone districts. That strengthens the language that was previously in the document. Based upon an analysis of views from the project areas to the east and the west. And again, that language is included on page 31, principle C4, or principle 1 C4, recommendation C4, that heights should be reduced based upon further analysis. Comment number 6, recommendation for design guidelines. The commission requested principle 4 related to sustainability to insert language preserving existing trees, preserving green space, and consider replacing green space lost to development. Then add language repurposing existing buildings, and then reference the sustainability plan. Each of those comments were incorporated into language. Recommendations S3 on page 33, recommendation S6 on 33, and S6 on 33. I won't read them unless you'd like me to read them. Comment number 7. Commission requested that the connectivity framework plan originally on page 37 should be separated into 2 maps to be easier to read, showing a clear distinction between existing roads and proposed roads. The commission also requested to indicate at a general level which roadway segments have existing public right-of-way for future improvements. Those 2 maps have been created, one on page 38, showing the existing roads, and then on page 39 showing the proposed roads. We did check with our property management division, and the proposed roads, none of the proposed roads on page 39 currently have existing public right-of-way available for improvements to respond to that question. Comment number 8. Commission requested that references to the Lakewood Comprehensive Plan be included in the plan to ensure that the Union Neighborhood Vision Plan is consistent with the comprehensive plan. There's an added, on page 8, there's language added that addresses the comprehensive plan. And then on page 31, recommendation C5 to principle 1, design guidelines should be developed in conformance with the Lakewood Comprehensive Plan. Comment number 9, commission requested to limit public storage uses in the project area. Currently, how public storage is defined in the zoning ordinance is defined as mini warehouse or storage. That's the technical language. And it has been added to the prohibited land uses on page 1 in planning area 1, or page 20 for planning area 1, and page 24 in planning area 2. We didn't recommend it in planning area 3. That's certainly something that planning commission can give us direction on. Felt that may be, that's where the existing mini storage currently is. And there's some additional language in the memo that talks about how the zoning ordinance addresses it. So certainly, should planning commission want to prohibit it in all district and all planning areas within the Union Corridor, that could be done as well. Then, let's see, moving on, comment 10. And now these are general. The previous comments were incorporated as part of the text, and you should have that as a red line. These are general comments that we followed up on as well. And commission requested follow-up regarding any stormwater drainage issues in the project area, and request that a liquid drainage engineer, Ann Hine is here, attend the public hearing. There is a detailed response. Maybe I'll read this one, if that's okay. It says that McIntyre Gulch runs through the project area as a major drainage way. McIntyre Gulch functions adequately, and there are no major drainage improvement projects scheduled for McIntyre Gulch. There are isolated drainage issues that may affect future development in the project area, including the requirements for enhanced detention and water quality facilities to meet current criteria. Future development of the 59 acres on the Federal Center, the Horseshoe property, would likely need to address drainage issues, including runoff, routing runoff flow through the site, and providing adequate drainage and water quality facilities should development occur in the property. So that, and Ann is available to discuss more detail on that, should commission request that. And then commission asked the number of businesses that would be non-conforming under the proposed land use recommendations, and would non-conforming businesses be allowed to continue to operate if they become non-conforming as part of the zoning ordinance. We identified 9 businesses, and Christy has more detail if you'd like to hear more about where they're located, that would be potentially non-conforming under the proposed land use recommendations. And just to answer the question, a legal non-conforming use can continue to operate if the use is not discontinued for more than 100 consecutive days, but they would not be able to expand their business. Getting towards the end here. Comment 12, and Planning Commission had comments regarding traffic concerns in the 2018 Union Area Transportation Study, adequately addressing traffic issues in the area. We acknowledge the comment and traffic analysis beyond the scope of this plan, and the scope of this plan is directed by the commission and council is to address land use and design. And Mike Whitaker is here with Lakewood Transportation Engineering to answer any questions that you may have regarding the transportation study or transportation issues. So that really concludes the comments that we heard and our responses to them. If you have further questions, we are available. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waddell. Are there any questions, commissioner questions for Mr. Waddell? I don't see any hands, so we will continue then.
I will. Al, I'm sorry, I was a little slow.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dale. Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Miller. Yes.
I was interested in the 9 businesses that are non-conforming. You said that I think Christy has.
Yeah, maybe Christy, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so if you go to page, let me pull it up here. Hold on one second. It's mostly in planning, or it's all in planning area 2. And this was really an initial look at, all the land uses, the current and existing land uses and businesses. So this is an approximation. It's not 100%. We would probably need to do a little bit more research to say 100%. But if you go to page 22 in the plan, this shows, there's a map that shows the existing or the current land uses. And so the number 1, which is auto, so you can see those at the bottom. And then there's 5 currently. And then the 6 industrial, light industrial, there's 4. So that's 9. But again, that's an estimate. This initial research was done back in 2019, and so to have a 100% answer for that, we would need to do a little bit more research, which we can do if we do continue to the next stage of the process. These are just recommendations at this point to clarify, so they're not code yet. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you. I will ask maybe Roger a question? I don't know if we're really into commissioner questions yet.
Well, for staff, absolutely, yes. Please
Okay,
continue.
thank you. So was there any feedback from regarding the businesses from the meetings that were held, or I don't remember any public comment that specifically addressed any of those businesses that you just listed?
In terms of getting, I'm sorry. Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry, I just am asking if the neighborhood concerned about losing those businesses, or?
I don't believe we had a lot of comments, and Christy, you can jump in too, about potential non-conforming uses during the process.
And just to reiterate, they would be legal non-conforming, so they can continue to operate. It's just there's in the zoning ordinance, in the non-conforming section, there is some language that says that limits the expansion, so they can continue to operate. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
As long as they're continuous for 180 days. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are there any additional commissioner questions? Ms. Peters, Commissioner Peters.
So is this the opportunity to maybe ask questions of the traffic engineer and the staff member on drainage? Is this the appropriate time for that?
Yes, please proceed. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks. First of all, thank you very much, Roger, for the updates. And this was really informative, very, very helpful. I guess I'll start with the stormwater drainage. And what I understood from the report is that what is there, it functions adequately, but there could be some issues, and the recommendation for enhanced detention and water quality. My first question, did I hear correctly that that would only apply to the Federal Center area if it was developed, or are there other areas that that would apply to?
I'm Ann Hines, City Engineer, Public Works Department. There are detention requirements that would need to be met for any redevelopment in the study area and actually anywhere in the city. The Union Square development occurred in 1973 prior to the city having a drainage criteria manual. And the detention provided in most of the sites is not, it doesn't meet current standards. So with any redevelopment, we are requiring detention to meet current standards, which reduces the flow rate, increases the volume of detention, and also provides water quality treatment. There have been a few redevelopments along Union that have provided additional detention. One is the West Terra development, just north of 2nd on the west side. There were 2 hotels on the Van Gordon frontage, and the 85 South Union, the Beacon 85 apartment building. That site originally had no detention, and current required detention was provided for that site with water quality. As the Horseshoe property in the Federal Center develops, the city criteria for drainage, detention, and water quality would have to be met.
Great, thank you. That's really helpful to understand. And I know it was mentioned earlier, and we've seen it in some of the public comments, and certainly I've seen it personally, that when it rains, that Union can flood, and that area can flood very quickly. In your opinion, is that due to the lower standards for detention, or what do you think would need to be done to address those flooding issues that we have today?
It's likely due to 2 different issues. One is somewhat unusual. Union Boulevard does not have storm sewer running parallel with the street, except for a small section on the west side between Cedar and the entrance to the 2 office buildings, the 2 office developments, sort of in the First Avenue alignment, although it's not called First Avenue. The rest of Union does not have parallel storm sewer. The storm sewer runs a half block west of Union through the development, and then a half lot east of Union through the office development. That is unusual, so that the discharge that reaches Union is in the curb and gutter. It doesn't have a storm sewer to discharge to. The drainage criteria manual allows for the curb and gutters to be part of the drainage system. And on an arterial, such as Union, the flow depth in the curb and gutter in a minor storm can be as high as the curb with no curb overtopping. And the flow spread must leave at least one lane free for travel in each direction. In a major storm, which would be the 100-year storm or the 1% chance storm, the depth of water at the street crown, which would be the median, is 6 inches. And the depth of water allowed at the curb flow line is 18 inches. So that's a foot above the top of the curb. That's totally uncomfortable for someone to travel through. And in a 100-year storm, we would expect that travel would be restricted. But in the minor storm, because there is no storm sewer collecting the water and the flow is in the curb and gutter, it also creates some depth that becomes uncomfortable for vehicle traffic.
Mm-hmm.
The other compounding issue is that the detention ponds that were provided in Union Square are along Union in parking lots, and those detention ponds discharge directly to the curb and gutter in Union.
Wow.
And because the detention is not up to our current standard, that flow reaches the curb and gutter quite fast at quite a high rate. So after a flashy thunderstorm, there is a lot of flow in the curb and gutter. It also creates an icing issue in the winter, and in some ways that's more of a problem for our street maintenance crews than the flashy flooding that occurs in summertime storms. There's no plan from the stormwater management utility to correct that situation with future development. As I indicated, that the redevelopment would have to meet current detention standards, and that would tend to mitigate the problem.
Is there any way to address it currently without future development? Just curious to know if there are any options. I understand we're not looking into it right now, but are there any options to address it?
Well, one option would be to install parallel storm sewer. That is not being contemplated right now. We have added Union to our list to evaluate. It's one of many areas in town that we need to evaluate as part of ongoing drainage issues, but I can't say that it would be a top priority to install storm sewer to fix that problem.
Yeah, understood. There's other higher priorities. Can you give an approximate cost of how much that would be to install a parallel storm sewer?
I don't, because we have not evaluated it. We have not evaluated where it would be needed and what size would be needed.
Is there a range or just kind of any ballpark, like from a very low to a very high, given that it's just really approximate?
We haven't even looked at it, so I can't give any number. I can't put a number to it.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that input. Okay, so the next question I think is for the traffic engineering, and it relates to the traffic study. And I know this was an area where we had also a number of public comments, and it was my comment at the last meeting that if prior to COVID, if I was driving that Union stretch, easily I could sit through 2 to 3 rounds of every single stoplight, and it can take a long time to get through there at rush hour. It seems to be worse in the evening, but it's also an issue in the morning rush hour heading out of there. And I know that in the traffic study, it was something that I think I had even discussed that the high foot traffic and high car traffic wasn't studied, and the traffic coming from Rooney Valley and those areas weren't included. And the study seemed to indicate that there wasn't a traffic issue, but we clearly have a pretty extensive traffic issue there today. And a number of the comments, folks were saying we need to do something to mitigate that traffic issue. And I guess my question is there anything that can be done at this point, or that you would recommend to mitigate and relieve it, because it's pretty significant today?
Thank you, Commission. Mike Whitaker, City Transportation Engineer. We heard that a lot during the earlier Union Area Transportation Study. One of the ways we tried to address that was we actually installed some travel time reader systems on Union. And so we basically have a reader at Union and Alameda, Second and Union, and then 6th and Union for the eastbound ramp there. And it's counting travel times 24/7, 365. I pulled this up on the 13th, so 2 days ago, and I looked at the previous month. So from June 13th to July 13th in the PM from 4 to 7. We were running 2 minutes and 33 seconds to go that little over a mile, 1.08 miles. So that's, roughly, a little less than 30 miles an hour, 25.4. Knowing we're in COVID and it's, kind of a weird time right now. I also looked at the same time last year, so June 10th through July 15th of 2019, and it was 3:07. So it was about 34 seconds longer. So the average speed was 20 miles per hour. But we're getting from Alameda to 6 in roughly 3.5 minutes on average. Obviously, you can hit a traffic signal and that will immediately add, almost a minute to your travel time. And so we're averaging 20 miles an hour through a whole bunch of traffic signals. So the best thing we can do is we just periodically retime the signals and try to deal with the queues. It's reasonably well. We also looked in the Union study, and it was kind of interesting that in the year 2000, there were 45,600 cars on Union between 2nd and 4th. And when we counted in 2017, there were 41,116. So there's actually less cars 17 years later than they were in 2000. Between 1st and 2nd on Union, in 2000, it was 45,800. In 2017, it was 46,685. So there's almost 1,000 more cars in that section. And on Union, between Alameda and Cedar, in 2000, there was 36,400. And in 2017, there was 41,989. So what that's showing is there's a lot more usage in the southern end of Union, but as you get closer to 6th, we've actually fallen off from what it used to be. Obviously, there's a lot more people going to St. Anthony's, a lot of the stuff in the middle. And as you mentioned, there's a lot more pedestrian activity, which can create some friction. And there's a lot more interaction, I think, in the overall area being a little more activated than it used to be. The Union Area Transportation Plan, they looked at 3 different modes. We looked at, auto-oriented, which would be the typical about 15% growth over 20 years. And then there was a mixture where we thought vehicle volumes might drop a little bit. And then there was a mode where it really focused on alternative modes to vehicles, and that dropped vehicles quite a bit. Having said all that, Right now, a lot of the intersections along the corridor are Ds. As you get closer to Highway 6, 4th is a C, Highway 6 is a B. But if you do a auto-oriented development, and according to our plan, we're pretty much E's and F's. You start doing the multimodal plans, depending on how aggressive you are, and those volumes, or the level of service is a little bit better. We didn't try to make any judgments on, which properties developed. We just kind of looked at overall square footage, and we use the same square footage. It's just how much, sidewalks and pathways and interconnectivity was put in with the plan. And then, our daily job is monitoring. One of the things the travel time system does is we put in a threshold over in there, and it'll actually email us if travel times exceed a certain point, so we can look and see if there's a crash or if a signal's not behaving correctly. So we're trying to be a little more proactive that way. But hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you for that information. I'm trying to understand how these 3.5-minute travel times, maybe it's an average over a period of time that's not capturing the high traffic, because it takes me way more than 3.5. I mean, I'm sitting through 2-3 lights of every single light, and that is certainly not reflected. I don't know. Maybe we could look at the data, because I'd like to see, like, maybe there's a specific time that's happening, because that 3.5 minutes isn't even remotely reflective of what the actual experience. And I know I saw some comments that were similar to my experience. I mean, it can be 15 minutes easy. So maybe if I could look at the data, and maybe that 15 is some, and that's on the high end, and down on the low end, there's like a minute or 2 minutes if the lights are coordinated and cars are coming, and somehow it averages, because I just don't think that an average of 3 minutes during those high hours, the 4 to 7 time frame, I guess I just like to see the data, because it's a longer period of time. There's about an hour where it takes 15 minutes easy, and it's really common. So it's just an experience of driving that regularly that people are well aware of. So that's one comment. I think you're probably correct in the 2000 to 2017 studies. However, we're in 2019, 2020, and there's been a significant change since that. So I don't know how to maybe bring that up to speed, but having driven that route regularly from 2011 until 2020, I didn't really have any issues until the last year or two. It's really been in the last year or two that these really long waits and multiple rounds through the lights, I may have even been in the last year or the last couple months that I've noticed it even worse. So I don't know what how to reflect what's happening in the data, how to actually capture that, and then even if we do, to how we could address it. I think there were comments previously that the multimodal folks don't feel safe. They're scared to ride bikes, so people are taking the cars. One of the things I had tried to advocate for was like public transportation, because a lot of folks in the neighborhood, if there was a bus that looped through there, but RTD was pretty unfavorable to that idea. That could maybe reduce some of the traffic.
Commissioner Peters, can I interrupt you just briefly? I need to make an informational announcement to the public that the comment window on Lakewood Speaks is going to close in about 5 minutes. Thank you. If you'll continue.
Sure, no problem. So I guess, I understand that the data, some of it because it's 2017 and it's been more recently. And then again, I'm not sure, where in that average of 3.5 minutes that folks through about an hour of time in rush hour, it'll be 10, 15 minutes easy. where that is reflected or how to have that reflected. But regardless, are there any thoughts additional to coordinating the stoplights? Any other thoughts that options that might be looked at to relieve some of that traffic that we're experiencing today?
I mean, the basic problem is we have so many collector roadways all funnel into Union. You know, it has to carry people from Alkire, it has to carry people from Alameda, it's carrying people up from Union. You know, so everybody gets funneled to that one corridor. So that's why in the study, you know, one of the proposed projects was extending Route Street over Highway 6 to try to relieve some pressure. But anytime you have, you know, more parallel roadways, just like in drainage, you know, it's going to work better than trying to funnel everything into one corridor.
All right, thank you. I also wanted to just appreciate the maps that showed what are the existing corridors that we have, and then the proposed. That map was really helpful. Appreciated that update with the revised plan. I'm trying to think if I had any other questions. I guess my last question is on and I may have asked this previously, with the proposed routes, there are a couple businesses that would be impacted. Did we reach out and receive any feedback from those businesses that might be impacted?
What do you mean by the proposed, where those extensions would occur?
Yeah.
Not at this point. I mean, it's conceptual, and I think it's a little premature to start asking, because there's probably a negotiation process that would need to occur, given that there really isn't existing right of way for those. So it's kind of early in the process. Unfortunately, we don't have that information at this point.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Some of the owners, obviously, when we were doing the Union transportation study, you know, questioned some of the routes. So I know, you know, we worked with St. Anthony's and the medical center there about the extension that goes through kind of Cedar extension. And we talked to a landscape company back there. So there have been some contacts back and forth, but that was back in 2017.
Could you share a little bit? I think those were the two in particular I was interested in. Any initial feedback from them?
I wasn't part of the team that was talking with them, so I'm not exactly sure. I know they worked on the medical center a little bit to kind of design their plans, knowing that, you know, we might try to push that road through.
Gotcha. Okay, and then I guess another question related to St. Anthony's. Definitely appreciate the reaching out to them. Did they have any comments on traffic and any, you know, regarding the ambulances? Like, I think about how when I'm sitting through 3 or 4 rounds of these stoplights on Union coming back during the rush hour, like what would happen if an ambulance had to come through there? I don't know if that was even approached with them, but I guess I'm interested to understand how they manage that, and if they have any concerns or feedback about that.
Well, that actually might be why you're sitting through 2 or 3 lights, because the fire, police, and ambulance typically have preemption. And so when they're coming, they can trip the lights ahead of them, and they'll get the green arrow and the green light as they're coming towards the hospital.
Yeah, they've never come when I've been through there. I just think about it. I'm just like, what if they did come through? But I haven't seen anything like that during the times that I go through there. And I'm not there every single day, but you know, it might be a couple times a week or once every 2 weeks that I have to drive that route during those times. So far, I haven't seen that, but certainly I think about it while I'm there.
Yeah, we work with West Metro, and they've got an Opticom system on their vehicles that we receive and trip the lights for them.
Is there enough? Okay, I guess if all 3 of the lanes are filled, I guess cars are able to pull over to the side, I suppose, because if all the lights are backed up and all 3 lanes are filled, like what I've experienced, like how do they work that out? They just move them out from the other side, and I mean that may not be quick enough, like
Well,
throughout.
The system we use shoots about 2,500 feet in front of them. And so it gives us usually some time to try to clear people out before the vehicle's actually at that location.
Gotcha.
So usually that works pretty good. Obviously, if there's a crash that they're responding to, which we've had a few at Second and Union, that it becomes a definite congestion problem.
That makes sense. Thank you for that. I think
And
those
I'm sorry. Just to address your question, we didn't get to that level in my conversation with St. Anthony. We didn't get to that level of detail at this point.
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious, maybe the system's working fine for them with that 2,500 feet in front and they're not seeing any issues. I'd be interested to get their feedback if they're they're having any, or obviously pre-COVID, because things have changed. I haven't experienced those wait times since COVID happened. I think there's some other questions. Those are the main ones that I had offhand.
Okay, if that concludes your questions, do you want to continue? Or
No,
are you?
I think I saw that Johan had a question, perhaps.
Okay, I was just going to open it up to whoever else might have a question. Didn't want to stop you prematurely. Commissioner Cohn, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. There are 2 questions on my mind that since we've been on traffic. One is that the 2018 study did recommend, and I notice it's reflected in the current materials also, that a lane be added to access US 6 eastbound, if I understand that correctly. Are we any closer to that? And do you still concur with that recommendation?
Yeah, so the construction crews are actually out there today.
I saw cones. I
Yeah.
thought that might be the case.
So it's going to be maybe a little different than you're envisioning, though, but there's still going to be a little island there.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that the second lane will be able to turn after the island, and sort of kind of taking out an angle point there to make it a little easier. So it'll still go through the traffic signal, but you can do the free right essentially if oncoming traffic's free. So that one's happening right now. And it's mostly to get a little better lane utilization out of the people coming off 4th, where everybody's fighting for that curb lane to get onto 6th.
Mm-hmm. And it won't when that project is completed, it won't overload the ramp.
No, I don't think there's going to be, like I said, most of it's going to be 4th. Obviously, some people on Union will figure it out as well.
I see.
But it looks like it should work pretty well.
The second question I had was, I know it's pretty much a pipe dream to put another bridge over 6, I think, between Route and it's Owens on the other side, or Quail, I can't remember which. But has any analysis been done to show how much that might relieve the traffic situation in the event that should ever be installed or funded?
Yeah, the 2017 study did micro simulations of that project, and I don't have it on the top of my head.
I've got it in front of me, but it's rather too copious for me to find quickly.
But it would be in the appendix showing how much it relieved. Obviously, in the tables, we just kind of categorize stuff like, high, medium, or low impact, and high, medium, low cost. But in the appendix, it would have, if you're looking for, Union was 10 seconds faster and route was 20 seconds slower, but it carries X number of cars.
Empirically, it would open enough of a corridor to relieve it. But I'll look at that appendix again. But I realize funding on that is pretty much of a pipe dream. But that concludes my questions, Mr. Hill. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cohn. Anybody else?
I do.
Yeah, Mr.
Thank you.
Shapiro.
As far as our protocol, I raised my hand on our participants list. Is that not a list that you're looking at?
I don't have the list up. Let me pull it up. I'm sorry. There we go.
That's okay. I just wanted to know if I should be waving
I
at.
see it. I'm sorry, Dale. I didn't have it up. Wave at me. I've been looking for visual cues here, but now I have the list. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. A couple of things. I neglected to thank Roger and his crew for addressing so carefully all of the comments that we made in the last meeting. That's very much appreciated. I was actually glad that the conversation turned to transportation, and even though I didn't think we were there yet. So that's, I have another comment. I anecdotally mentioned that I have been riding my bicycle through that area for more than 50 years, for longer than Lakewood's been a city, and longer than there's been any buildings there. And since we're talking about anecdotes and our experiences, and I think it does relate to a vision plan, I rode my bike through there again last week twice, once in the morning rush hour and then once in the evening after rush hour at 7:30-ish. And so it wasn't a pleasant experience. I don't know if the other commissioners have yet looked at the Lakewood Speaks, but there were a couple of late comments about commuting and walking in that area and how unpleasant it is. And I would say that's been my experience for many years, to the point where I just avoid it. But I went deliberately last week to just try it out. I was standing at in the crosswalk at 4th Avenue with my bicycle ready to cross when the light changed, and it changed with the walk sign for me. And I moved forward and a car turned into me. You nearly didn't have me with you this evening. Fortunately, it was a very nice person. She stopped and was hanging out the window to apologize for nearly running me over. And I thought, if I'm going to be killed, I want to be killed by someone nice who's going to apologize about it. And I'm being facetious, but as a bicyclist and an active pedestrian, it's not really facetiousness. I mean, obviously, distracted driving and courtesy are primary, not only for one car to another car, but also if we want to change the culture on Union Boulevard. So I guess that's, I think I'm directing this primarily to Roger, although it could also be to Mike. We know that those primarily suburban driveways such as Union Boulevard change, with some community participation where you get more people to do all the low-hanging fruit, and that's double up in their cars or take public transportation or ride bicycles or walk, and they get cars off the road. I mean, that's what most people are complaining. Many people are complaining about cars on the road, and I'm wondering if in this, what my experience was, I guess I should finish that experience too, is that at almost every intersection that I crossed, I had to wait for a car to back out of the crosswalk. So they use the crosswalk as a stop line. So they're literally stopped in the crosswalk and I have to wait for them or go around them. And sometimes they're looking at me like, what's wrong with you? You're on a bicycle, that sort of thing. That happened actually both in the morning and in the evening when people were not rushing. And there was another close encounter in the evening too. I was really disappointed. It was probably the worst experience I have had for a long time at any stretch of road on a bicycle. And of course, what I recognize is that it has to be a raised consciousness of people in the area. And so in a vision plan like this, where is the place that we start to get the community involved, not only in saying I want this or I don't want that, but also in how the culture is changed in their community? Is that, I don't know, to whom am I addressing that? I think, Mike, you probably have some experience with this, but also to Roger. Is this
No, that's a good question. Mike, I don't know, Mike, do you have anything to start with on that?
Well, unfortunately, my wife's been hit on Wadsworth and on Kipling. So I've got a little too much experience with it.
I hear that.
It is a sad time for drivers. Don't seem to be getting better from my memory for sure. Obviously, we're trying to reduce distractions. So that's tough. For me, you know, we try to get more pleasant areas that will draw people to them, which is one of the reasons why we try to focus a lot more of the bike traffic towards Van Gordon instead of parallel with Union. Just, you know, it's just safer if there's less conflicts, like you say, if there's less things going on.
I should have said that I was actually on a commute ride between Golden and my house, which is Morrison Road and Kipling. So going on Van Gordon wasn't really a convenient or viable option. Anyway, I'm sorry, I should have said that.
And I think the other thing is, like anything, you know, when there's a few people, you're not looking for them as much. Obviously, we have some trails that are heavily used, and it seems like the drivers actually behave a little bit better around places that the trails are more used, because they kind of expect to see bikes, we think, you know, or pedestrians or whatever. They don't kind of come out and shock them. But yeah, it's a tough point that I think a lot of traffic engineers all over the world really are still dealing with, other than, you know, there's a few countries that are way ahead of us in that way.
You're mostly the solutions for traffic engineers are expected to be more lanes or overpasses or, you know, different routes, that sort of thing. But I think what we really know has to happen, and this is what I was hoping you would comment on, is a culture change where people, not because of more laws, but because of courtesy, concern for other people's well-being, that sort of thing, start to think of it as a community. And I think that something like a vision plan, like we're talking about here, a neighborhood area, is the perfect place to start bringing up to the people that are attending these meetings and listening in and making comments and sort of thing. Like this, the part of the change will be in them. Is that, would you say that's fair? A fair statement?
I think so.
Mm-hmm.
And Dale, I wanted to kind of address your question. I'm kind of trying to think how, you know, how the vision plan, as you kind of talked about, would address it or would relate beyond the specific transportation, you know, crossing traffic signals and all that. I think through, like say, through process, should there be additional meetings, you know, it's a culture change. I think through design requirements for, and I know that doesn't solve the people crossing all the time, but having more bike facilities, pedestrian amenities, refuge maybe in the medians where they can go halfway through, maybe directional signs, you know, information. Maybe people don't have to, on a bike, there might be some alternate routes. You may have to cross Union, but maybe you can go up Van Gordon or something like that through signage. So I think to address your question, I think, you know, there may be some design nuances that can get to that, but I agree it's a cultural shift that needs to occur. But we're looking at this as a neighborhood, kind of a corridor / neighborhood, but to try to make it more of a neighborhood than just an area that traffic is just passing through on Union. So
sure.
I don't know.
I'll say that the suggestion to take an alternate route is no more satisfying to a bicyclist than it is to someone in an automobile who complains about the traffic on Union. And so your suggestion would be to, why don't you take Kipling? You know, they're not satisfied with that, and neither is a bicyclist, really. I mean, it's Yeah, anyway, okay. Well, I appreciate those responses, and I know this is hard, but I think that I did want to bring up this idea that it's not only about the zoning and that sort of thing, but it's also about culture change. Thank you. That was all I had. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Dale. I see that Teresa has a hand up.
And I just wanted to follow up on I just had a quick question on what Commissioner Miller had asked. It's on the same topic. Can I just ask it really quickly?
Teresa, are you okay with that? I'm not getting any feedback from Teresa. I show a hand up. Go ahead, Commissioner Peters, Rhonda.
Just thinking about the question posed by Commissioner Miller, are there any opportunities like on the sidewalks or off to the side of the street to have a dual use with pedestrians and bicycles? Is that completely out of the question?
Well, there is I think it is a 10-foot path. It might correct me if it isn't. So it's a multi-use path that would be used by bicyclists and pedestrians, but certainly, and maybe Dale, you've kind of talked about that too, is bicyclists want to use the shortest route, and certainly sometimes they don't use that multi-use path, no matter how wide it is, if it's off street. But I believe it is 10 feet, and that's the intent, and it's called a multi-use path. Adjacent, paralleling Union.
I'll throw in that it is a nice wide path. And normally as a bicyclist, if you're trying to get somewhere, you do avoid those paths because there's children and pedestrians on there, and you just want to avoid those kind of collisions. It happens on Union. There's so few pedestrians or bicycles that the path works pretty well. It was really at the crossings of the streets, each of the avenues on both sides, east and west side, presented problems. So it wasn't so much the path itself. I think as usage increased, I think Commissioner Peters' comment is going to be or underscore sort of what will become an issue as it get more used. It'll be hard to share that path, but right now that's not the issue. I don't know if that helps. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, are you concluded there, Rhonda? Commissioner Stone, do you have a hand up?
I do, and I just kind of going to back away from some of the specifics that we were talking about. I want to. We touched on this in an earlier meeting, and I just need to get this clear in my head. I've got a few questions about kind of background. We talked about it again, like I said, in an earlier meeting, but what exactly did the city council ask for that we're responding to with this plan? What was their phrasing, and how was that request conveyed? And then I have a couple of follow-up questions to that. And what I'm getting at is I want to make sure that this, that we're meeting the request. So let's start with that. What did they ask for? What was their phrasing? How was that request conveyed? Is there scheduled drivers or a deadline timing?
And maybe Travis, you can.
Yeah, I can help with that. So this first came up in the.
Roger, would that be your area to respond to, or?
I think maybe Travis can give a little more background.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah, there we go.
All right. So this first came up in the context of the Development Dialogue Committee, which was looking at zoning changes. Prior to the residential growth initiative, they were looking at some changes to maybe where development happened, how development happened, and basically looking at making some updates and corrections to our zoning ordinance. A lot of the concern at the time of that committee and of the people that were commenting to that committee was about development on and around Union Corridor. So they had requested that we look at two aspects. First, they were looking at the aesthetics of new development, and we talked with the committee about creating a design review committee that would review new developments in places where the council created new design guidelines. And so one of the first requests was to create some new design guidelines in the Union Corridor as the first place for that design review committee to take action. So part of this planning process is to create those new design guidelines. And then the second aspect was to take a new look at the zoning, the building height, the setbacks, the how the buildings address the street, that sort of thing, and do that specifically on Union Corridor, which is an area that the design committee heard a lot of, or the development review committee heard a lot of concern about. So those were really the two aspects that we were charged to look at. We talked with them about doing a full traditional neighborhood plan, and they really said, no, we'd prefer to have something. The message that we were given was we'd prefer to have something that really focused on just those two areas and moved a little bit quicker through the process than a traditional neighborhood plan.
So Travis, I've got a follow-up question. When we had our meeting, I think it was June 3rd, where we discussed this in a study session on Union, we talked about whether or not it was feasible to separate design guidelines from this actual plan, since design guidelines and the review committee or commission will be operating independently of this particular plan, and that the process that they put together will apply to multiple plans. Is that still a possible way forward here?
Roger may be able to comment more on that. I think, we were using the feedback, a lot of the feedback from the meetings and from the public interaction was intended to inform the design guidelines for Union Corridor. Obviously, the design guidelines on this corridor will be different than they would be on a section of Colfax or on a section of Alameda, for example. So I think there's a lot of meat in this plan that is important for designing, creating the design guidelines for Union Corridor. That said, picking the plan apart is certainly a possibility, in doing it in stages.
Can I add a little bit to that? Yeah, I think, there are two clear implementation steps that we hopefully made clear: the zoning changes and design guidelines. I think a lot of the thinking in terms of the recommendations for both are interrelated, and I think they're all connected in the plan. One option to move forward is to whether adopt a plan. I still think there's some value in not picking apart the plan and not, say, cherry picking things, but looking at the plan as a whole, but looking at implementation steps could be taken separately. The design guidelines could be moved forward first. The zoning could be held back. But I would, I still think that the plan is kind of a, say, holistic view of the area. And I think the two areas are interrelated, but certainly the implementation steps, the next steps in terms of zoning or design guidelines, can be separated out very easily.
So Roger, I appreciate that clarification. You mentioned up front in your overview that design guidelines was the third step in the process. And so what I'm hearing right now, and correct me if I'm not hearing you right, is that you see value of having some treatment of design guideline in the plan, but that the actual, like the zoning overlay, the actual particulars of design guideline will be the final stage in the three-step process. Is that correct?
Well, both zoning and the design guidelines addressed in the plan kind of set the stage. They're not really design guidelines. There are some design intents.
Maybe I like that characterization. Maybe we consider rephrasing it to design intention.
And that's what they are, really.
Yeah.
They're not guidelines at all at this point. I don't know if Cheney is still on the call, but they're just kind of setting the framework for design guidelines. And I think that, from my perspective, and Travis, correct me if you have a different approach, but I think the zoning changes, the land use, as far as implementation steps, are they're two independent steps. and design guidelines could be adopted through a process. Zoning changes can be adopted through a process. But I think the whole thing still kind of comes out of the plan as part of the process. So I don't know if that clarifies things at all.
I think so. Thank you. I see Commissioner Stone has a hand up still. Or
Yeah, just a couple of related questions. One is, was there so when you say they requested it, who was they who requested the design guidelines and the zoning changes? And then is there a deadline or a schedule driver for responding to this request?
Well, they is ultimately the city council. These discussions happen in the development dialogue, and ultimately the city council approved moving forward with the creation of a design review committee. Obviously, they haven't reviewed any zoning changes for Union Corridor because that would follow this plan if it moves forward. And what was the second part of your question? In terms of a timeline, no timeline was given. There was a lot of discussion in the committee about doing it quickly and finishing it in 2019. That didn't materialize for a variety of reasons, but I think they wanted to move forward on these things.
Thank you.
does that conclude your questions?
For now.
Okay, let me see. I don't see any additional hands up. Oh, there's one. Kathy.
So
you're
would you,
next.
sorry, would you prefer we use the hand up in the participants?
Well, Dale got me on track here where I'm actually looking at
I can do either.
the raise your hand board, and I appreciate that, Dale. Thank you. So that's probably better than me stopping to scan the screen.
Okay, I'll do that in the future. I apologize. Thank you. You know, I kind of had a question after the presentation. Roger, this question might be for you, although somewhat of a follow-up on Commissioner Stone's comments, because I was kind of confused about the steps being vision plan, zoning overlay, and then design guidelines. But there's a section called design guidelines in the vision plan.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if they're different than the design guidelines we're talking about doing in 2 steps, maybe we could call it something different. If it's the same thing or part of the same thing, I would suggest maybe removing it from the vision plan and just having, for a quicker, easier process.
Okay, the design
Roger,
guidelines, if you can address
also
that.
respond to this too.
Yeah, it's really, maybe it's misnamed a bit. I mean, recommendations for design guidelines. I think design intent or whatever the words probably are better. These aren't design guidelines in the plan. They're intent statements, they're ideas. There's some good ideas, but in no way do they take it the step that's needed to say, give the direction to a design review committee to use them. So they're really preliminary, design intent ideas that would set the stage for design guidelines that need to be much more detailed and much more thought out. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it really does. That really helps clarify. And maybe if we would use different, like you said, use a different word if it's a different thing.
And just to add to that, so the section number 5 on page 31 in the plan, it says recommendations for design guidelines. So the design guidelines is going to be a document that has not been created yet. And that's a pretty standard name for this type of document. It's called design guidelines. So what's outlined in the plan are principles that we would be looking more into during the design guidelines process, which would be the next step. And the zoning overlay and the design guidelines would sort of work together. And Cheney, I know you're back on the call, so if you wanted to add something, that would be helpful too.
Yeah, I was gonna jump in after Roger last time, but this is a good time to comment on doing them separate. So guidelines generally do follow a neighborhood plan. They are written for specific areas. They can be citywide as well, but in this particular instance, we are focusing on a specific area or corridor or neighborhood, and that is consistent with a lot of design guidelines. The other thing is that the zoning overlay, as Christy said, they do work in tandem. So they are intended to, the zoning provides standards. They are requirements of development that, you know, for example, right now in MCT, there's a maximum height of 180 feet along Union Corridor. And we heard that, you know, a lot of people thought that that might be a little too high, and so reducing that. But if you go ahead with design guidelines and don't change the zoning, my point here being that some of the, due to the vision of the area, the design guidelines might be, might just have a discrepancy against existing zoning. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. They're just suggestions. It's the zoning overlay that is what has to be followed, and the zoning is what has to be followed. Yeah.
There is also the Design Review Commission that hasn't, I believe that came about from the development dialogue process.
Yeah, they haven't formed yet though.
It hasn't formed yet, but they will be a reviewing body that would be looking at development review or development proposals, and they would be looking at the design guidelines for Union as they're reviewing the proposals.
Yeah, that's my understanding also.
Okay.
And I was actually at that development dialogue meeting where this was brought up, and it was brought up actually in the context of my memory of potentially doing, and I think Travis mentioned this, potentially doing neighborhood plans citywide, but not having the time or resource to, you know, take on everything. So narrowing down to Union, but really focusing it as a neighborhood vision plan is what I had heard. And that was, I didn't hear anything at that point directed to Union as far as design being the main focus. I had thought that it came out of the neighborhood plan and having a neighborhood vision plan. So I don't know. I had actually, because of Commissioner Stone's comments last time, I did look online and I tried to find either recordings or minutes of that meeting online, and I wasn't able to. So I don't know if that would help if we could get that. But thank you. That was my memory of what council had asked for.
Okay. I see a hand up, Mike Whitaker. Mike, do you have a hand up?
I just need to apologize to Commissioner Cohn. I was looking for his answer on how much traffic route would haul. And I noticed that we didn't print that in the Union study because we didn't anticipate too many people to do it. So I will have to dig that information out and send it to him.
Yeah, thank you, because I was just looking at what, and couldn't find it in the back of it either. It may be buried in there somewhere, but if you could get that to me, I'd be interested in reviewing it.
Yeah, we intentionally didn't print attachment G, which is all the synchro analysis, because there's hundreds of pages.
Yeah.
And so just to be more sustainable, we didn't do it.
Yeah, some of it can get pretty dense, I understand. Thank you.
Okay, at this point, I don't see any additional hands up, so I will conclude questions for staff. Thank you, staff, for all the information and the answers, and for continuing to work hard on this and bring the details to light. I know we all appreciate that work. So the next step is I will call for a motion.
Mr.
Chairman,
Chairman.
I think that Travis had a comment.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't see a hand. Travis, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to call your attention to, it looks like there were 5 comments that came in during the comment period before 8 o'clock. So I wanted to call the commission's attention to those. And as of this point, it looks like it's not registering that you all have seen them. So I'm probably going to have to ask you all to refresh your Lakewood Speak screen or back out to the main screen and go back into the case so that it registers you all as having read those comments.
Yeah, thank you. It just I only show one comment, so so we need to back out and then go back in. You said.
Let's try that. I think if you go back out to the main Lakewood Speech page and go.
Would you all like to take a brief recess and have everybody take a look at those comments and
Go
come
back in.
back?
It might also work to just refresh your page between 7 and 8.
Okay, so you need to log out and then log back in, correct?
I don't, it's potentially you need to log out. Yeah, let's try that. Let's everyone
Before you
log out,
do
log
that,
back in.
I'm sorry, before you log out, I'm just using the refresh button in the search bar.
I was able to do it by refreshing.
Yeah,
Same here.
I just went back and I've got it now too. So I think it was Commissioner Stone suggestion. Do we want to take amount of time here for everybody to read these? Just a lot, 15 minutes. And then in 15 minutes, we'll reconvene and move forward. Is that appropriate process? I don't see any
Sure,
objection.
I think so. Yeah.
I see a few thumbs up. Thank you, Dale. Okay, so let's, I show 8:36, so let's convene back here in 15 minutes, 8:51, and we will continue.
Seriously?
Well, we're at 8:51, but we don't quite have everybody back. I think we're still missing a few, so we'll wait a minute or two. Okay, we're back live. We are missing one commissioner, it looks like, and some staff. There we go. They're coming on. Okay, I believe we are complete. So it's 8:52 now, and we will move forward. We've concluded questions for staff after the presentation. Thank you once again, staff. And thank you, Director Parker, for prompting me to allow time to read the additional comments. I think we're now complete with regard to everybody reading all of the comments. So, so where we are is it would be time for a motion and discussion and so forth on the plan. And I'd like to outline a process which I think will work best for us. Since we are going to be editing of the plan, you know, staff provided a red line for us, and the next step is to work through this and edit to try to get to an endpoint. What I'd like to do is I'd like to ask the commissioners first to raise your hand if you to make comments, and I'd like to do this in a general round of comments, commissioner by commissioner. And then once we've completed any general comments, and they can be specific to the document, but not a red line process yet. I'd like to have general comments, and then we move into the red line edit, and we just go page by page together. And we have people make a motion to edit on that page, and we ask for a second, and we vote on whether or not to incorporate that edit. So I hope that process sounds clean to people. I think it's going to be easier and more productive in terms of staying on track if we give general comments and then we just focus cleanly on the red line. In the red line process, of course, since it's a motion and a second, the next step is discussion. So we can then further discuss the particular red line issues. But my goal here is to hope that we don't get into general comment while trying to make red line edits. So I hope everybody is comfortable with that. And so with that, I will open it to general comments. Well, actually, first I see Mr. Schultz has a hand up. Aaron, did you have a question?
Pardon me, that was a holdover from earlier.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. All right. So now I will open it to general comments on the red line. Do we have any hands up? Okay, well, I wanted to make a few comments. You know, I think that, you know, I recognize a lot of things in the public input that has come in, and I appreciate the feedback that the public has given us in this round and in previous rounds. You know, I think there's a lot of good points that are made in there, and so I wanted to acknowledge that. One of my biggest concerns in going forward with the entire plan is the funding issue for infrastructure. And I'll have more, you know, a little more to say about that. But, you know, my concern is in the TMA, as we learned in the study session where we had a presentation, the TMA's focus is on non-vehicular traffic. Essentially, it's on bicycles and pedestrians and improving walkways and connectivity. And those are very important aspects, to say the least, of movement of people. But it concerned me that the TMA efforts, at this point anyway, they don't have an allowance or a focus on vehicular traffic beyond trying to encourage pedestrian and bicycle traffic. So that's a bit of a concern, especially against the backdrop of all of the public comments with regard to traffic on Union as it is right now. With the ability to get funding, the TMA process was something that gave me hope that there might be funding for infrastructure expansion to support the growth that's envisioned in this plan. But it doesn't appear that that's going to be the case for vehicles. And, against the backdrop of the current traffic issue that the public has highlighted over and over, I looked deeper into things, and a couple of the things that came to mind for me were presentations that I saw when I went through the DRCOG Citizens Academy. And they were talking about growth, and there was a lot of research presented. There were 2 studies presented by staff, one from DRCOG and one from the Colorado State Office of Demographics. And both of those interests were very interesting. And what they told me was that between 2010 and 2017, the population growth actually dropped in Jefferson County, while the rate of job growth increased in Jefferson County. And more importantly than history is what their projections were going out to 2050. And it basically, what they're showing is that Lakewood's future growth is not considered by the State Office of Demographics to be residential in the Union Corridor. They show all of the growth in the Union Corridor, to be with regard to, business and job rate growth, specifically job rate growth. Of course, I found that very interesting with the current plan on the table. So what that tells me is that if DRCOG, who's the major funding stream of federal money into the whole Front Range for infrastructure, doesn't consider Lakewood's Union Corridor area to be a prime area of residential growth, then that puts us at a disadvantage as to getting funding. And I think then that of course caused me to look deeper at things, and at the in particular looking at the comprehensive plan, and several of the goals in there really speak to what we can do with the Union Corridor. ICS 1C or 1E actually says to define and identify underutilized and underperforming commercial areas and develop tools to assist in the revitalization of properties. Well, I certainly think that's a good idea along Union Corridor. We certainly had public input on that tonight as well. And then another one is to market Lakewood as a strategic business and employment hub. So I wanted to kind of highlight those 2 things as we go forward into the plan. And at this point, I want to see, okay, there we go. Dale has a hand up. I was going to see if there were additional general comments anybody wanted to make. Dale, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. My comment was more of a question, I guess, regarding procedure. Since we had read the document, in the red lines, was there a particular reason you thought we should, since it's, there's 30 some pages of document, is there a reason that you thought we should vote on each page rather than just have people bring up areas of concern?
Well, my thought process here is that if we go through the red line page by page, then, and there's a lot of pages, but there aren't all that many changes necessarily. I mean, we'll find out as we work through it together. But my thought process is that if we complete a page with actual edits and then move to the next one, move to the next one, and we work our way through the document, then at the end of the night, we've addressed all of the things in the red line without bouncing around in our conversation or without having general comments that we then try to translate into actual edits. So I'm thinking it might be just an easier and more clear process to achieve individual edits. That's where I'm coming from. Any other ideas on that? Okay, well then how about if we begin that process? And I've been kind of working off of the the PDF that was on the website. And
Excuse me, Chairman
Yes.
Henfield.
oh yes, Mr. Stone, go ahead.
Are we going into the red line? Are we done with general comments? I actually had some general comments and had my
Oh, I'm
hand
sorry, I
up.
didn't see your hand up. Yes,
That's all right. We got
let's
too many.
let's
That's
continue
fine.
with general comments first. I encourage that. Yes, go ahead.
So I do have some general comments, and I don't know if these will make a difference on how we proceed or not. So I want to start by saying I like this three-step process. I appreciate the work that's been done on it, and you know how beautiful the information was presented. I think it was a really good looking report and easy to follow. I'm not prepared to approve this plan or recommend that it move forward tonight, and I want to walk you all through why. Number one, I don't feel like we're listening well enough to our citizens. And so of the 22 comments on Lakewood Speaks today, 8 of them told us out and out that we're not communicating well with them. We're not listening. We're not communicating with the right people. We're not communicating well. We're not translating what they're telling us into this plan. 13 of them asked for no more residential high density. Some expressed confusion and frustration that high density residential is in this plan, even though they remember opposition at the public meetings. 13 of the comments cited traffic and related safety concerns. I think an additional level of detail, references to projects in the CIP. I know they're not there yet, but something real regarding traffic needs to be incorporated into this plan, because without it, we don't even know if this is workable. We don't know if it's going to be livable. So our citizens are telling us we're not listening to them. That alone makes me want to pause and take the time to have a more complete dialogue with all the impacted stakeholders, including those who are new to the conversation, those who feed into that corridor, but not necessarily there. So the second part of it, why I'm not ready to move forward with it, is from my first reading, I thought the vision was too narrow. I think that and I understand that you were trying to meet a request for design things, but I don't really believe that it's comprehensive vision or a complete vision. I think it short sells the value that could be gained for the community from this neighborhood, which is a real gem. I have a lot of fond memories from when I worked at Denver West. So I see 4 major gaps in this plan. So I want to go ahead and spell them out, and then we can figure out if we need to do a red line, or if you guys think these gaps need to be filled, and then maybe we come back with all the red lines, and then we can vote on it instead of voting one-on-one. So I need clarity on how this plan aligns with 4 things. One is the Lakewood vision statement. So I would think that this vision statement in this vision plan would echo that or promote some key concepts in the Lakewood vision statement, such as livability. I know that's a little bit in there. The recreational and urban, the unique identity, sustainable, and something that's enjoyable for generations. I would think that the vision statement would at least complement that. So the current one, it seems rather generic rather than unique. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe we could, something focused on preserving and promoting what makes this neighborhood unique, popular and livable instead of trying to change it into something. So I just think we need to refine the vision with the help of our stakeholders. The second area where I see a gap, where I can't see alignment, is alignment with growth area action items from the comprehensive plan. Chairman Hill, I appreciate you bringing up the comprehensive plan. On pages 5-34 and 5-37, they talk about this growth area in the Union Boulevard. So I believe that these action items should all be well underway and partially assessed before we can complete a vision for this neighborhood. And if some are already underway, then their status and impact on this vision and the recommendations in this plan need to be articulated in the plan. We need to tie back to what those things are, where are they, and how does it impact what we're recommending in this plan. Third area where I see a gap, where I can't see alignment, are livability and quality of life goals from the comprehensive plan. And Chairman Hill, you quoted a couple of these. I think that this vision should assess those goals and action items and figure out how can we move them ahead? How can we achieve and move ahead some of these things that are in the comprehensive plan to get a more comprehensive vision for this corridor upon which we build these other two tools. The fourth area that I don't see alignment, where I see a gap, is a more transparent alignment or correlation between all the multiple plans that are the ones that are cited in the in this plan, as well as others that I think need to be consulted, housing study, or any recent economic development plans. A matrix showing areas of overlapping recommendations and common priorities would be great, so we could see how all this lines up. So I know that's a lot of work. I'm also concerned that some of those plans cited in this vision plan are from 2011, and if they've not been, I'm concerned they might, if they've not been reassessed and updated. Excuse me for stumbling. So this vision should indicate if they've been updated, if they've been changed. Is it the same recommendations? Are they too old? What was in those plans? So I just perceive these are huge gaps. And I think they're a little too significant for me to feel comfortable approving this and passing it on to the next stage. So thank you for letting me kind of explain all that.
Very good. Thank you, Teresa. Kathy, you have a hand up?
Yeah, I apologize. Please cut me off if this isn't the right time. I'm not sure if this is general enough. But related to the kind of to those 2011 plans that Commissioner Stone just referenced, I was kind of wondering about that too. There is a lot of overlap, I noticed. But when it comes to the boundary area, those plans all do include the medical campus and go even a little bit east of Route Street, some of them. So I don't know if this is a proposed amendment, in which case it's not time, but I'm still uncomfortable with the fact that we don't have the medical campus included. And then as a general question, did we ever talk to, there's Healthcare Realty Trust owns a lot of those medical buildings. Were they involved at all in the discussions, do you know?
No, they were not.
Okay. But they would have been sent a notification because everybody along the.
Yeah, they would have been notified, but they weren't talked to directly.
Okay. So that was just sort of my general comment about I'm wondering about, is this plan going to supersede either of those from 2011? And as was mentioned at the beginning, to try to match the boundaries, maybe we could look at those boundaries and more match them by including the St. Anthony Medical Campus.
Okay, are you complete? Very good, thank you. Seeing no more hands up, Teresa, do you wish to make a motion at this point?
I don't think so. I think I wasn't thinking of a motion, no. Mm-mm.
Okay, well, I was understanding your comments to be that it was premature to do a red line. And I
I
didn't know if
think
you
I'd
had an
rather
additional
know if,
motion.
I think I'd rather than make a motion, thank you for asking, I appreciate that. I guess I'm interested in the thoughts of the other commissioners regarding my sense that this, if we call it a vision plan, it's incomplete. We could call it something else, but still, as Roger talked about, to separate, or Cheney talked about, to separate it out, I don't think is the best thing. To separate the design guidelines out, I don't think is going to be the best thing. I would like a solid foundation. And if we're going to call it a vision plan, I would like for it to be, you know, a comprehensive vision.
Okay, well, I'll follow your, oh, wait a minute, is there another hand up? Yeah, Commissioner Cohn, Johan, I see your hand up.
The first time around, I waffled rather badly on this plan, and I find myself going through some of the same thought processes. And I have a concern, a general concern too, that kind of parallels that of Commissioner Stone, because there's a lot of the comments we're getting don't deal with things like vibrancy. You know, I really did appreciate the person who spoke about being to Italy. But the fact is, most of the comments we got, which weren't, you know, we didn't get an overwhelming number, but they're more concerned about transportation and vehicular traffic through the area. And it seems like the plan itself, the conceptual plan, is more concerned with vibrancy and activity within the area. And I find that something of a contradiction. Now, as we go through the redlining, some of that might be cleared up for me, because I see some of my criticisms have been considered. For example, I believe there's been actually a whole revision of page 37 with a new connectivity framework map. And I do applaud that, because the old ones seem to be somewhat dated. But I'm still kind of riding this contradiction that the people who are watching, a number of people who are watching us seem to be on a different track than those of us who are looking at things like design, pedestrian walkways and such. Not that these aren't meritorious comments or aspirations. And I've done some thinking about the vision, but I'll reserve comment on that right now. But I have some concerns about this. In other words, the people who are participating seem to be on a different track than maybe what the staff has presented to us and what we've been discussing and what's in the text of the document. The other thing I would comment on in passing is that, you know, at one time we had a great many neighborhood plans. Now, when we did Plan Lakewood, just when I first came on the commission, a lot of these plans were to have superseded. One of the things that's happened, and I recognize the dialogue got pretty much into this and arrived at the current recommendation that certain parts of the city are unique and deserve a different treatment. And certainly the Union neighborhood is part of that. Nevertheless, I still have a concern that we're beginning to devolve into individual, a good deal of attention into individual neighborhoods and plannings that impact them. Nonetheless, I think we ought to stay with the present emphasis and see if we can arrive at some conclusion. I'll quit right there, but I'm still deliberating, whether we're on the right track, especially in terms, we don't get as much feedback as I would like to see. What we're getting doesn't seem to be where the thrust of this study is. And I'll stop there.
Very good, thank you. Commissioner Miller, Dale.
Sure, I'm happy to go. I think Alex actually has.
Oh, is Alex?
raised
I'm
his hand.
sorry. I can't tell who chimed in first.
Not ordered. Let me let Alex.
Yeah,
good.
no, thank you both. I think I would echo maybe what Commissioner Cohn was just saying. I mean, but maybe backing up to the red line edits. I mean, personally, I'm fine with those edits. I think that they're good edits. They address our comments from the last meeting we have. I think where I might stop short is actually recommending this plan to go forward at the current state. And what I would like to hear maybe from Roger is what it would take to go from where we are now, maybe to more formal neighborhood plan, something more comprehensive. And would that actually address some of the concerns that we're hearing tonight from the public?
Would you like me to address that then a bit?
Yeah, sure. I'm apologize. I know we're past staff questions, but
Yeah.
I think Commissioner Stone's comments made me think about that and like to hear your take on it.
Well, yeah, I've been involved actually in whatever the number is, 9 neighborhood plans. They're very extensive. They take about a year or more. Typically in the past, we had done them with a larger staff than we have currently. And we're currently not on an upswing in terms of staff. They do take about a year. They take a lot of educational pieces, and they are, the ones that have been adopted are kind of tailored to the neighborhood. If it's in certain part of the city, it could be security. In certain part of the city, could be growth. And those plans were adopted over a period of several years, and they're included in the comp plan as kind of historic documents at this point. They're very time intensive, staff intensive, neighborhood intensive, resource intensive to develop. They have value. I think one of the larger values is creating neighborhood organizations, which you're seeing now. I've been involved in these plans for many years, maybe 20 years, we'll say. So the direction we have on the union plan was very, I'm going over old ground here, but it was very specific, very focused on 2 issues related to the development dialogue. And that was very clear from the beginning. Certainly staff can look at larger issues. We are very short-staffed at this point, and we don't have a lot of resources. Some of the comments are very valid, but we intentionally tried to emphasize through every step of the way what we were looking at, which was the direction we were given. To do a larger effort, certainly it can be done. We certainly would need more resources to do it, to be honest with you. We're pretty stretched, and Travis can speak to that a lot better than I can. We're stretched very thin right now. To add more things to our plate moving forward. I don't know. Travis, if you have any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I appreciate your candor. I just wanted to say I appreciate your candor about that. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't need to add a lot. Yeah, I think it would be some time before we could restart this as a larger process.
So Alex, are you complete?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Dale, you're up.
Sure, thank you. I hear what everyone is saying, and I actually agree, but I don't know that that's, from a process perspective, how we should proceed, which would be sending this back to a department of the city that doesn't have the resources to do what we're talking about doing. And I think maybe what we should, a suggestion I might have would be to make sure that we are satisfying, and I appreciate Commissioner Stone's question earlier about clarifying just what the City Council is asking for. That perhaps what we should, a possibility would be to give them what they ask for, but also feedback about the other comments that we have gotten, saying that probably this isn't, this is what you wanted, it's taken a year for us to do this, but this isn't satisfactory, and what we need from you is to apply some resources to this so that there can be a true neighborhood plan that's put in place. I mean, so our role sometimes is to make a recommendation to the City Council that involves something like that, and that's asking for resources. We're not the governing body, so we can't ask for resources, we can't allocate them, but we can certainly say, well, here's what you wanted, but let us just say this is not, and I don't want to speak for everyone, but we might be saying, this is what you asked for, but it's not what you expected, perhaps. And that's that people really want to have more than just these things. And that means some help for the planning department and resources for them, and that means some money. And so this is everyone's work on this is wonderful, and I love what's going on, and I really like that we're starting to see more community input from both sides. By both sides, I mean people who, one person who's saying, larger setbacks, I want shorter setbacks, which to me sounds like a community dialogue where you have someone saying, I want A, and the other one says, I don't want A, I want, I mean, that's just a normal thing, but that's what we all have to deal with. If all the comments are the same, you kind of think maybe we're only getting to one group of people who are giving a certain kind of comment. So I think that would be my recommendation, that we follow Chairman Heald's recommendation to go through these red lines that are what we asked for, and give the City Council what they asked for, but with a strongly worded or I don't know how exactly we could decide how to do that, recommendation that this is not what the public is really satisfied with. They need to apply more resources to this. That's my suggestion.
Hey, thank you very much, Dale. So with regard to my recommended two-step process, I think at this point, in light of the general input, it would be appropriate to call for a motion as to whether or not we continue with the red line of the document before us, or we table it, however that's appropriately characterized in Robert's Rules terminology, in lieu of continuing to work with staff to refine and more completely edit this plan. Does that make sense? We motion, we could motion to continue with the red line evaluation. And if we choose not to continue with the red line evaluation, then we would have to decide our next step.
I'd like a clarification though for what you're asking, and that's when you say red line edits, it sounds like we would not be talking about sections that are completely missing, which might be about traffic, which might be about economic development or whatever else.
Yes, Dale, that in my view, that is a more comprehensive process to add sections or entire concepts. And that is the kind of process that I see us doing through a continued dialogue via a study session. Is that, maybe that's our option here, is that we make a motion to table the red line analysis and a vote, and to hold a study session to continue working on the document. How's that?
I guess I'm still kind of following up on my comments earlier. I hesitate to create something that the city council didn't ask for. I think our role is to give to them what they ask for, along with our other recommendations, which would be to expand the study in the ways that we've been talking about. But we don't really have a charge to go forward with these other aspects. I think we need to get city council to buy into what's going on here. We don't want to go to do all these other things and they'll say, well, we don't care about that stuff because that's not what we asked for. We care about it and we know the citizens care about it. But I feel like we at least need to have a joint study session with city council or something that is where we're not isolated and not really knowing what they're willing to do and give us more direction.
Thank you. That's an interesting idea. We have several other hands up, and I don't know who was next. To see Teresa and Kathy. You guys know.
Kathy, if you want to go ahead.
So I want to agree with Dale about that. I think it's really good to give, if council asked for a neighborhood plan, then that's what we should give them. And if that requires more resources that they need to give to the planning department, I can't imagine that the planning department would object to more resources. So I would be okay with tabling it. And if we're not clear as to what council, really asked for, maybe we could listen to get a tape of that meeting, or at least that part of the meeting on the Development Dialogue Committee where that came up. So thank you, Dale.
May I?
Yes, Roger, go ahead. We got a
Sorry,
couple of things up, but
jump in, but I just wanted to, maybe overstate my case, but we lost one staff member, Holly, if you can recall, worked on this project and was not replaced because of obvious reasons, budget.
Right.
And I just want to emphasize again, we certainly can. We have the capability of doing neighborhood plans and the skills, but we are strapped in terms of personnel and resources. So some of the things you're talking about are certainly valid things and that can be done, but I just want to again emphasize we have a very small staff. We have other projects that we have to continue to do, and it's challenging right now to stretch anything further than we are.
And to add to sort of follow up on the comment about the type of plan that council wanted, we did a presentation, Roger did a presentation for the dialogue committee about what was involved in a full neighborhood plan. And the result of that presentation that we could probably find was no, we aren't looking for this 18-month process. We're looking for this narrower focus. So council specifically said, this is not a traditional neighborhood plan. Right. So that was the direction we were given. And so expanding it back to a neighborhood plan is beyond the scope of what we've been assigned to do.
Well, I think we need to ask for clarification on that, please.
We can certainly provide that. Yeah, that recording of that meeting.
Get that transcript or that recording. That would be beautiful. Thank you.
I see two hands up. Teresa. Can you hear me?
Sorry, I was muted. So I'm circling back. I apologize. I'm circling back around to the question then of, well, it's not really a neighborhood plan because I didn't ask for it. Are the design guidelines in there good enough to the design intent? Can we call it design intent or conceptual something? Strip out everything except for the design stuff and let the city council have that. Now the zoning is another matter because we were getting feedback from you know, stakeholders who want to be involved, who are telling us the density, you know, the high density residential is not, it's a non-starter. And I think that we need to maybe pay a little bit more attention to that than we have. So that's another story, but can we give partial part of this? Don't call it maybe a vision plan. Don't call it a neighborhood plan if that's not what it is. What are our options here?
I think, well, Travis, you have a comment there? Or?
No, I mean, I certainly think you can recommend a different title or a different name. I think, yeah, this is a new type of product that we haven't done before. If we want to come up with a new way to title it, that's entirely all of our collective prerogative, and yours as the planning commission to recommend to council. You know, this is the narrow scope that you asked for, so let's indicate that in how we name it.
And I would want to, you know, strip it down to just that material. Like I wouldn't want to put all the stuff that our citizens are opposing because they think that they weren't listened to. You know, I'd want to revisit that and just let's give the city the bare minimum what they asked for. But I agree with Commissioner Kentner. I would like some clarification to make sure that we're giving them what they asked for.
Would a joint study session be the next move to get that clarification?
That I like the conversation with them.
I think that's how we would have a conversation.
So I had my hand
Yes,
up.
Dale, sorry.
No, that's okay.
I'm
That's all
remaining.
right.
Go
Hard
ahead.
to look at everything at the same time.
Yes.
I understand. So I think this follows with what everyone is doing. I'd like to make a motion that we table this and schedule a joint study session with City Council so that we can get some clarity and we can express our interest in getting some resources transferred to the planning department so they could work on this more if that's what we want, or they tell us don't do that.
Second that motion.
So we have a motion and a second to table this and work to schedule a joint study session with City Council. Are there any additional comments?
I'm just going to ask the question now. This tabling and the meeting with City Council, it's going to be some extra work for staff. So do you guys, does the commission want to allow them some time to come, you know, since they're strapped?
We very definitely need to understand that this needs to work for their schedule in terms of preparing. Absolutely. Roger, Travis, you have any input?
I'll jump in maybe first. I'd like direction and we don't have to have this at this moment, but what types of materials would need to be prepared for a joint study session. If it's just asking the question, we certainly can give the background on how the decision, and I have a presentation actually that Travis was referring to at the meeting where we talked about scoping this particular project and the direction was pretty clear. That's what you're seeing. So would be good to get direction in terms of what level of preparation needs to occur at that meeting, or if it's just a simple discussion where, you know, we can prepare the background. So just some clarity at some point from commission.
A couple hands up.
Mr. Chairman, I think Christie's had her hand up for a little while.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't scroll my screen.
No worries. I don't think I have like the hand raising capability because I'm a co-host. Anyways.
No wonder I didn't see it.
No worries. Sorry. I did want to mention that we did go to City Council during a study session in August of 2019. That was the first study session we did. That was prior to starting the meetings with you guys, with the Planning Commission. So we did present kind of where we were at that point in 2019. So the plan was nearly done. So they did in some ways give us the go-ahead to proceed to Planning Commission. That was again August of 2019.
Thank you. Now, Kathy, I see a hand up.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about everybody's time, and I'm thinking it might be more efficient if we just review the transcript from when they gave us that original from the Development Dialogue Committee before asking. It just seems a little bit premature to have a joint study session. And shoot, there was one other thing. I'm sorry. And I will try to think of what it was. Sorry.
No worries. Travis, with regard to reviewing a transcript, would the video of that meeting be available to us?
No, these were development dialogue. They weren't videoed.
Oh, so it wasn't videoed. Okay.
And we certainly have minutes that we can produce at the very least.
Yeah, I was sort of interested more in a transcript or an audio recording rather than, I know the minutes can be real boiled down sometimes.
We may have that. I don't know how long the clerk's office keeps that stuff. So I don't know. If we have it, we'll get it to you.
Okay, and then kind of as a compromise, maybe in between, and maybe you know more, is the development dialogue planning to, I know that at the Ward 4 meeting, I think Councillor Skilling said they're planning to meet again in the near future.
Next week, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
we have a meeting coming up next week.
So maybe to save everybody time and resources, we can first review the tape, and then if we still have a question, first ask just the Development Dialogue Committee when they're already planning to meet.
So just to be clear, Roger and I were very clear on what our instructions were from the development dialogue. So we're asking them if they want to reconsider what their instructions to us were, or
I want to listen again, because I was at that same meeting and I did not get the same clarity that you did.
Okay.
And a couple of counselors that I've talked to about it, they also thought that this was that we were doing a neighborhood plan starting with Union Corridor.
Okay.
So I think that maybe we all need some clarification then.
Can I jump in since I made the motion?
Yes, Dale, your hand's been up a while. Go ahead.
Oh, I still believe that the joint study session is the way to go. I think we can do that without staff having to put together much, because we have so much material presented. Part of the city council is different than it was when this process began, and I think that is that right? Yeah, we have new city council people since a year and a half ago, or a year ago. Yeah. In any case, from the earliest stages of this process, and back in August, when our own study session was canceled in order to expedite this process, I felt like we didn't have much interaction with city council, and I think we're at a point where we don't need to review transcripts. Honestly, I think we need to hear directly from them whether or not we are on the right path, or whether they're going to provide additional resources or whatever else, because we're kind of hearing here, I heard this and I heard that, and I talked to other people and all that sort of thing. And I think we just cut to the chase. We have been spending a lot of time on this. I think we get the city council and have them give some time to us. We deserve that. If I know they're busy, but we're busy too, and they make a lot more than we do. But I'd like to see if that's the way the vote would go. I would like to just reaffirm that motion.
Okay, are there any additional comments at this point? I see Teresa has a hand up.
Just shoring up what Commissioner Miller is saying. I think that the study session, in addition to, making sure that we're giving them what they needed and talking about the value of neighborhood plans and talking about resources for planning and everything else, I think that these concerns that our citizens have been raising with us, I think that study session would give us a chance to explore those. So I don't Roger, you asked about materials. I really think it's, maybe it's a draft of the plan and the comments that we had from Lakewood Speaks today, and maybe that's it. I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, simple, right? The basics, not going back to history, but what do they think today? Have we met their expectation?
Dale, you have your hand up?
Sorry, that was a thumb, not a hand.
Oh, a thumbs up. Okay, I saw. Very good. Are you complete, Teresa? Okay. At this point, then we do have a motion on the table with a second, and the motion is to table this issue in the Planning Commission and schedule a joint study session with City Council. If we're complete on comments, then
I'm sorry, I have a kind of a point of order. Can we do those as two separate?
well, let's ask the motion maker. Are you willing to separate motions, two separate votes?
A motion to table and a motion to have a joint study session as being two separate motions?
That would be up to the motion maker, I think.
I don't want to set up a motion to fail, but at the same time, my whole point was not to just postpone this. It was to postpone this with a specific direction, and that is to talk to City Council directly.
So then can I ask a follow-up question?
I think Travis has a comment too that he wants to make.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
Travis
guess my follow-up would be, because the
several
direction
hands.
came from Development Dialogue Committee originally and not the full City Council. And again, just thinking about saving time and getting, things done, would it be better to meet with the Development Dialogue Committee, which might be more efficient rather than the whole council? So that was more doable.
I don't know. I would be willing to hear what other people say, but my initial response is that we're not really producing this to give to the Development Dialogue Committee. That's a subcommittee. We're giving it to the entire City Council, and people who are not on the Development Dialogue may have input. I mean, so no, I think it ought to be to the City Council. I think we can carve out a half hour, an hour or something for us for this. We've spent a lot of time on it. A lot of citizens have input, and I think it's worth their attention. So I guess I'm sort of standing firm on my motion.
And can I add one more maybe friendly amendment to your motion that you can consider or not? We don't set the council agenda, or I can't initiate a study session with them. I can request it. So if I could ask your motion to be to request council to schedule a joint study session with the Planning Commission.
Yes, absolutely, because it only makes sense to do that. So I'll modify my motion to ask City Council, or to request rather, a study session, a joint study session.
And I'll second that amendment.
Okay.
And Johan, I believe you have a hand up.
Yes, thank you. I'm looking ruefully at my copy of Robert's rules. Actually, a motion to table is not debatable, but this is not really a motion to table. It's a motion to refer or commit. And it is debatable if it doesn't go to the merits of the whole question. It can be made as one motion, in my view. So,
thank you for that.
Mr. Rice, do you have any input on the wording of the motion?
You just muted yourself, Paul.
Went off. Not at this time. As you guys were putting motions together and so forth, I had a comment, but I'm just listening right now.
Oh, okay, thank you. So back to you, Johan. So did you want to?
no, I think the motion is proper and excuse me. Yeah, I think the motion is proper and appropriate, and we can act on it.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Dale, I see your hand up. Okay, now
that was
No worries. I think we are at a point to call for a vote on this motion. Dale, would you read the motion back one more time so that we're clear?
Yes, my motion was to table or postpone this this discussion and to request a joint study session with the city council to discuss this project.
Okay, and then I guess we'll just need a show of hands here as our option for voting, right? So I will ask all in favor of the motion to raise their hands.
Can I have a point of order?
Certainly.
Commissioner Cohen, did you say that it should be done differently than that?
No, I think this is a proper motion, you know, for a body of ours, for us to go ahead and commit it on to council, and you know, we'll see what council tells us.
To refer, but not to table, correct?
That's right.
Okay. Thank you. I'm just clarifying. Commissioner Miller, would you mind repeating the motion, please?
With
Sure.
the word refer, yes.
It's the motion is to refurb is the language, I believe, this this issue, and request that city council have a joint study session with us for further direction and clarification. Thank you.
Okay, are we complete at a point of voting? I will ask all in favor of the motion to raise their hand physically so we can count them. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 votes. So it's unanimous. The motion carries. So this issue is in our layman's terms tabled, but in the parlance of Robert's rules, we are referring this issue to City Council with a request for a study session. So with that, I believe we are complete with agenda item number 3. So we will move on to general business, and I will open this for input on general business. Dale, I see your hand up.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to make sure that staff was clear on what we were thinking that we would need. I think our direction was that there isn't anything new that needs to be created for this. It's only pulling together existing materials. Okay, okay.
Mm-hmm. That's our understanding.
You had something for general business?
Well, and I certainly think, you know, Travis, to the extent that there may be a question as to why we're requesting this, we can work with you to provide answers to that. Does that seem like a workable process for you?
I'm clear on the reason, and I don't have any doubt that we'll be able to get us. I just wanted to be clear that it's not in my control to schedule that. So I'll put in the request. I'm sure it'll be achievable.
Okay, and Dale, thank you for that clarification. I think that's important to, at this stage, give direction to staff that that's where we are. Thank you.
May I make one more comment?
Yeah, Roger.
Yeah, just it's my understanding you're talking about the scope of the project, and I would hope that you would also, I'm beating this to death, but recognize the level of resources that are needed. That's all I'll say about it. And that there is a level of resources needed for a level of work that is expected. Or so just that's it.
Yeah, I think we understand. Thank you. Any additional comments? Then yes, Rhonda.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the point that if this does come back to City Council and they do just want the narrow scope, that I'd support changing the name as had been discussed, so it's not confused that this is a full neighborhood plan. Just wanted to echo support and make sure that that's part of what's put in front of City Council for that discussion.
Okay, I think we can take that step at the discussion. All right, now are we complete? Johan, I see a hand up. Not anymore.
I just didn't take it down from the earlier.
Okay, very good. I don't want to overlook anybody here before we do move on. So it appears we're complete. And with that, I will ask the clerk to read item 4.
Item 4, general business.
Very good. Thank you. Do we have any general business before the commission? Anybody like to raise anything? I am seeing no hands. So, and with that, we will close general business. And oh, now I see a hand.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to make the comment to the very few people in the public who are watching. And I think that we had the comment before about Lakewood Speaks, that they weren't being able to see that we had read all their comments, and we believe that problem has been fixed. Let us know if it hasn't, but I think should now be showing that we all read all the comments, and I wanted everybody to be assured that we did.
Okay, yes, thank you very much for that. That was an issue that came up and it appears to have been corrected. So thank you. So now with that, I'd say we are at 9:51 p.m. and we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.